there is no such thing as a one-way street. Everything can be regenerated, rejuvenated, restored if we put the right energy into it. And it's personal to our specific situation. There's not like a blanket statement saying, do this, because people vary in what then is the information their body needs to epigenetically control their optimal health.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I bring you a very special guest, somebody that has really revolutionized the way we approach life and medicine. He's the founder of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland. Now, before we get into the podcast, I want to welcome all the newcomers here. This is a place where every week I get an opportunity to interview guests, experts, and thought leaders in the worlds of biohacking, longevity, human potential, so that you could have the tools, the techniques, the tactics for you to elevate your life to the next level. But more than anything else, I want you to remember that whatever you're looking for, whatever you're looking to grow into, whatever you are looking to improve in your life, is already within you. And all that you are seeking, you actually are. And it's within this process of remembering, of knowing that we are safe, that we are loved, that we are connected, and remembering that feeling of just how great it is to be alive. That's who we truly are. That is the magic that actually transforms the way our biology is being played. It transforms how our DNA is being expressed. It transforms how our mitochondria are functioning. So with all the guests that I do bring in, I know they will bring a lot of good tips and strategies. But at the end of the day, if we're doing the deep work, it's really truly understanding and remembering that you are safe, that you are loved, that you're connected, that you are brought here on this planet to just be you. And the feeling of being you, the feeling of doing you, of enjoying life, of learning from its challenges, of growing into you, is all that you ever need to be. And that knowing and that living in optimism of life as being this great gift that we get to express ourselves, and through our expression, the world changes for the better, that is our deepest medicine. Now, if you want any insights or if you want any resources for you to dive into more of this work, go to mythrivestate.com/biohack. And there's actually a digital version of me that you can ask all your questions in performance and longevity, in biohacking, and in living your best life. Also get free resources at thrivestatestarter.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. This really allows this message and all the tools and this vision of a world where we could be lit up as this version of us, this authentic version of us, that we could all just be ourselves authentically, known, seen, and interacting and evolving in life together. That's the cool stuff. So if you want this message to grow, do us a favor, subscribe to this podcast, comment, and engage with this podcast, and share this podcast episode with your friends and family members. Now, this podcast was actually shot as a part of a big series on mental health. And if you would like to get access to that, go to mythrivestate.com/pro, because I interviewed 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental and emotional resilience. And I brought Jeffrey Bland in on this interview. So check out this interview. You're going to learn so much about functional medicine, what it means to actually look at health through the lens of holistic living. You're not going to want to miss any of this information. And my friends, please enjoy this episode with myself and Dr. Jeffrey Bland. Hello, and welcome back to another session of the Thrive State Summit. Today with me is a dear friend, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, is an internationally recognized leader in nutritional medicine. He is co-founder of the Institute of Functional Medicine in 1991 and is known to many as the father of functional medicine. Over the past 35 years, Dr. Bland has traveled more than 6 million miles, teaching more than 100,000 healthcare practitioners in the US, Canada, and 50 other countries about functional medicine. Dr. Bland serves as the Director of Nutritional Research at the Linus Pauling Institute of science and medicine, and in the early 1980s, working directly with two-time Nobel laureate Dr. Linus Pauling, who he considers as his lifelong mentor. Dr. Bland has authored several books about nutritional medicine, both for the healthcare professional and for the general public, and he has also principal authored over 120 reviewed research papers on nutritional biochemistry and medicine. He spent 40 years developing breakthrough approaches in the fields of holistic health and nutrition. Seeing the profound difference his work has made in people's lives, Dr. Bland said big, bold health to multiply the impact. Today, he's unlocking the promise of immuno-rejuvenation for everyone. Dr. Bland, welcome to the Thrive State Summit.
Well, what a great name for your program. I can't tell you how much I appreciate being part of anything that aspires to thrive to greatness. So thank you so much for being part of this discussion.
Well, we wanted to bring you on because you are really a leader and a pioneer in functional medicine. And what functional medicine, has done for many people is actually address root causes for chronic illness. One of the main stressors that people have in their lives that they might be dealing with chronic health problems, joint problems, head problems, metabolic problems such as diabetes, brain fog. How did you come about functional medicine? And can we talk about maybe some of the root causes of a lot of these chronic health conditions that could potentially be prevented or reversed, even if people have those symptoms now?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll try to compress 77 years of living into just a few sound bites here. My journey started back in the 60s as a medical student, later into recognizing that my real passion was around why people got ill versus what they had. And so I transitioned into a PhD program because in the PhD program, you always have the chance to be stimulated to ask questions. And
Yes.
I was really I was a big question asker. And so the PhD program, as it related to my medical interest, I think fit my personality very well. And that led me into an academic professorship that ultimately then led me to the extraordinary opportunity to spend 2 years on sabbatical in the early 1980s with Dr. Linus Pauling, as you mentioned. That was a life change situation because not only was Dr. Pauling and his wife, Eva Helen, the two of them are remarkable advocates for, I would say, equanimity among people. And their byline that I would hear virtually every day was, "We're here to do all we can to try to help reduce human suffering." And to me, that was a pretty broad objective, but it's something that I shared. If we could spend a life, each one of us, doing what we can do to help other people reduce suffering or dysfunction, that's a meritorious use of your life. So that led me ultimately to give up my tenured faculty position and start a company. It was kind of a silly idea. I had a young family at the time. This was the early 80s, to start a company to teach physicians how to do nutritional medicine in their practices. That grew up over years. It was not a linear path, but it grew up so that in 1990, actually it was 1988, my wife Susan said, "Jeff, you've been traveling a lot and you're meeting all these remarkable people around the world that you keep talking about that are doing very remarkable things. And it seems like maybe it would be beneficial if we hosted a conclave, a whiteboard meeting that you could bring some of these individuals in. We could all sit, these are people from around the world with different disciplines, and talk about the what if. What would the healthcare system look like if it was idealized? You didn't have to worry about reimbursement. You didn't have to worry about licensure. Just what were the principles of a healthcare system that would really deliver the best outcome to people? And so that led into extraordinary conversation. She held a meeting in Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And we had about 44 people come in from different disciplines that I had known. And the conversation was very robust, very high energy. And at the end, people said, "Hey, this was so engaging. Why don't we do it again?" So we did it in the same place the following year. That would have been 1990. And I, at the second day of that meeting, came up with this concept that what we had been talking about was not disease, but rather it was human function. And that human function was the precedent stage upstream of when you finally got downstream to what we would call a disease. And so if we were really wanting to talk about how to improve health, we should really be focused more on function and less on disease. And not that
Mm,
it was immaterial, it was still important, but it was kind of the end stage of
yes.
processes that have been going on upstream for some time.
Mm,
So I then raised the question with that group on that second day during the second year, and I said, it would seem to me that there are four subcategories of function that if we could measure them, quantify them, and make them part of an assessment tool that the health practitioners would use, that we would change the dialogue way from that of a disease focused to a health focused kind of environment. And those four categories of function are physical function, metabolic function, cognitive function, and behavioral function. And
mm,
if we could find ways of measuring and quantifying each of those, this would be a different kind of health assessment rather than just doing a blood screen and signs and symptoms that would be associated with the progenitors of disease. We'd be looking at aspects of a person's ability to be resilient and functioning in their world and lifestyle and with their own genes. And so it would be a personalized approach towards improving function, which then I said, if we're going to do that, then maybe we should call this functional medicine.
mm,
Well, at the time, this was 1990, my colleague said, well, Jeff, that's an interesting idea, but I don't think the term functional medicine is a good term because in 1990, the connotation of functional medicine was either rehabilitative medicine with geriatric patients that were dysfunction as a consequence of physical disabilities, or it was considered function meaning all in the mind, psychosomatic. And so it just a psychosis that was being defined as a functional disorder. That was true. In 1990, those were the terms that were used around functional medicine, but I have been following the literature very carefully at that time. And I recognized that for the first time, we started to see articles in the peer-reviewed scientific medical literature. There were functional cardiology, functional gastroenterology, functional endocrinology. And I said, well, maybe we ought to skate to where the puck is going, use a hockey analogy, and we should redefine what function means in terms of this new language because we're learning how to measure function in different ways than we used to be able to have available. So we did choose then to call this functional medicine, and we set up the Institute for Functional Medicine. We had our first international conference in 1991. And, it was a few, I guess you'd call it spirited pioneers that hung in there against the odds because we were kind of swimming upstream, so to speak, against the dominant thinking. But over the last 32 years now,
yeah.
quite amazing how this concept has grown up. And we reviewed it, or we view it as a systems biology approach to healthcare. And
Mm,
so we're less concerned about what you call something. We're more concerned about where it came from and
yes.
what are the dysfunctions in the system of our body that leads to those downstream things that we ultimately call a disease. And the reason I think that's important on this close is if you take any disease within the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD handbook, you will find that, let's take type 2 diabetes as an example.
Yeah.
If you had 100 type 2 diabetes patients, all with that diagnosis, you would have 100 variations on a theme. They don't all present exactly the same. They don't all have the same, what we call etiology. And therefore, under the term type 2 diabetes resides many variants. Now we recognize that medicine and pharmaceutical science recognizes that because we have now 16 different drugs that are approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes for different variants with different outcomes. So what we, I think, started to establish in 1990-91 as a functional model, I believe has grown up now to be much more well recognized as being true, that a disease is not what an individual has. What an individual has is a dysfunction that presents as their own unique collection of symptoms and signs that desires and deserves their own treatment approach. That's the kind of model.
That is a beautiful model, and I just want to acknowledge and congratulate the years of belief in continuing to work through the traditional medical model. I was trained in the traditional medical system, and it was very much disease centric and not looking at the different pathways of getting disease. We can even know symptoms in the body, whether the joint pain or brain fog. All these symptoms are just symptoms, and we are treating in the traditional medical model just those symptoms. not recognizing there are different pathways that go wrong in human function that causes you to have that particular symptom. And therefore, the treatment would be to treat the pathway and not just the symptom.
I think you hit it exactly. That was what we landed on. Now it turns out to make sure that I don't overly state this discovery. After years of starting the Institute for Functional Medicine, I think it was like 6 or 7 years after we started it, one of our members came up to me and he said, "So, Jeff, do you realize that there was an article by a very well known dean of a medical school in England in the Lancet Medical Magazine on functional medicine in 1874, titled Lectures on Functional Medicine?" And I said, "No, you got to be kidding me. I consider myself to be a bibliophile. I try to follow words very carefully, but I had missed that citation. I didn't know it existed." And so going in and reading those papers in the Lancet, he was speaking to the same model that we developed. Obviously, they didn't have the tools that we have in terms of measuring function more precisely, all the new analytical tools, but conceptually, what he was speaking about in that late 19th century discussion of where medicine should be going was what we then later in the 21st century started calling functional medicine. So I think that idea has been around for some time. I'd like to think that we have advanced it by being able to marry it, the conceptual framework, to the emergence of informatics, biometrics, and behavioral science, all the new things that we know that give us a better understanding of why people get sick and how to personalize their intervention and treatment before they end up in a hospital terminal disease state.
Mm. And what I find so empowering is that once we start to understand the functional processes involved in getting a symptom, then we really have the playbook in terms of how to start reversing them. And so if you happen to have a chronic illness right now, whether it be autoimmune disease or neurological deficit or anything like that, there is hope. Now, one of the things you have discovered, I think, as a part of understanding these functional pathways that go awry, is just how people are living their life. Their lifestyle contributes to a big chunk of these functions going awry. So can we talk about maybe some of these lifestyle contributing factors to dysfunction in human systems leading to symptoms and disease?
Yeah, I think you said it wonderfully there. I want to compliment you that there was a lot in that short bit of words that you used that relates to where we are today and our understanding. I think that the most important singular increase in our understanding of how function relates to ultimately our state of health. And that's the one thing that I think I've learned is that when we talk about health, that in itself is very personalized. If we asked something like 3,500 people on our website to define for them what health means to them, and only 3 people said health to them meant the absence of disease. The remainder of people talked about health for them was some functional thing, going to their grandchild's college graduation, taking a trip to Africa and going on a safari, being better at playing the piano. I mean, all sorts of different, running a marathon. People have very personal definitions of what health represents for them, and it ties to their functional status. And the beauty is that virtually every one of those functional characteristics that we broke it down into 6, what we call core physiological processes, all 6 of those are directly, intimately related to our lifestyle, our environment, and our behavior patterns,
Mm.
all of which are modifiable. And I want to emphasize, because people would say, well, what about our genes? Those are hardwired, Jeff. And, we didn't get to fill out an application card. We just got the luck of the draw. And some people got really good luck and their genes seemed to be galvanized against anything. And other people got not as good a genes and they seem to be susceptible. Well, I think that is a part of the story. Certainly genes are present. We know that, recessives and dominant characteristics, the Mendelian laws of genetics. But what we've learned is that our genes, they're all encoded in what I call our book of life, 23 chapters. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes that represent our book of life. Half of those chapters written by our biological mother, the other half by our biological father. and they code for everything in every cell of every tissue and organ of our body at every age. Now you say, no, hold it just a minute. You're telling me that every cell of the body contains the encyclopedia for any other cell at any other age? Well, why has the liver cell not been expressing the message of the heart cell? And why is the heart cell not expressing the message of the brain cell? It's because those cells have found ways of regulating the expression of those genes only to express the message of that organ. If they express another message of another organ, that's not so good. You don't want the liver to become the skin or the bone. And so the concept of how that's regulated is a process called epigenetics.
Yes.
It is things that happen that put tags on our genes as we're developing as an embryo and fetus and then ultimately infancy that regulates how our genes are expressed. So the liver cell stays a liver cell and the heart cells the heart cell. Now, the important thing that we've learned just in this century, in the 21st century, is that there are many characteristics that still get modified in the way they can be expressed epigenetically as we grow older. And those things that modify the way those genes are expressed happen to be principles that every day occur in our lives. The way we eat, the way we think, the way we move, the way we sleep, the way our digestion works, the microbes that live in our gut, the so-called microbiome. All of these factors, the electromagnetic radiation that we're exposed to, chemicals, xenobiotics, all of those things influence the epigenetic process that regulates how our genes are expressed. So therefore, a person could have really good genes, but they could be epigenetically tagged with hostility so that that person ended up with disease. Or you might have genes that had susceptibility, but they've been tagged with suppressing information saying, we don't want you to be expressed, so keep yourself quiet. And now they don't express the disease, and a person, even with the genes, doesn't end up with the disease. So these constructs are the new 21st century currency that are defining function at the cellular and molecular level and tying it directly to how we live, act, behave, breathe, sleep, and so forth.
That is so good. I just wanted to, wrap that up. It is really these lifestyle factors that control the epigenome. And if disease is passed down from generation to generation, it's not necessarily that you're passing down the genetics per se, but the epigenetics, how your parents, how your grandparents live life. Are they still storing trauma in their body, etc.? In my book, Thrive State, it was really I wanted to thank your work for it because it really talks about cellular health and that there are things that we can do: sleep, nutrition, movement, our thoughts and mindsets, what we're feeling, whether or not we're part of a community, whether we have a sense of purpose, whether we're living for ourselves or living for others. All these things control the energetic or epigenetic environments of our cells. And then that would give the cells the instructions as to how to behave. So based on how we live our life, we could actually control the genetic expression of our DNA.
It was a brilliant, brilliant statement. And I can see why your book is so well appreciated. That was brilliantly stated. And I think that is exactly the breakthrough of this century. It empowers all of us to take charge, not just to be victims, but to be advocates for the person we want to be, and give us the flexibility to be that person. And I think, it's interesting in biology, and I'm saying what you well know, so I'm just kind of being repetitive. We often learn that we think that health or disease is a one-way street, that once you stepped off the corner onto the disease track, you can't go back. But in biology, we've learned that every process is reversible. Now, some processes are slowly reversible, others are more rapidly reversible, like our immune system can reverse its function very rapidly. Our brain neurological cells, neurons can reverse, but more slowly. And so there is no such thing as a one-way street. Everything can be regenerated, rejuvenated, restored if we put the right energy into it. And it's personal to our specific situation. There's not like a blanket statement saying, do this, because people vary in what then is the information their body needs to epigenetically control their optimal health.
You glance through the 6 different topics or the 6 different areas that control cellular behavior. Can we go ahead and list those down today so that people can potentially audit their own lives in terms of what they might need to focus on to create better cellular health?
Yes, absolutely. By the way, I do have a series of questionnaires in my book, The Disease Delusion, that allows a person to assess each of those in their own life. So just
Oh, great.
a resource. So let's, in no necessary order of priority, these are all equally important. Let's just go through them. First is what we call the gastrointestinal restoration, the gastrointestinal immune system. And that construct, the gut, is more than just digestion. It is true, certainly, that the gut is principally responsible for breaking down big particles of food into small molecules that can be absorbed as nutrients and feed our body. That's our cellular health. But beyond that, 60 to 70% of our immune system is clustered around our intestinal tract. So the gut is an immune organ as well as a digestive organ. And so we developed a program called the 4R program, which stands for Remove, Replace, Reinoculate, Repair, the 4 steps for gastrointestinal rejuvenation. And that's actually been used now by literally tens of thousands of health practitioners with their patients. I think it's one of the cornerstones of the functional medicine model, is the so-called 4R or 5R program. So gastrointestinal health is one. That ties in very closely to immunological health.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, the immune system has become, as we certainly saw during SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, it's a lot more important than maybe people thought in terms of its resilience and its ability to be ready in case of need. The immune system is fascinating because the cells within our immune system turn over quite rapidly. In fact, just to let people know, on average, our immune cells in our body are changed out every 3 to 4 months. So we have a new immune system maybe 3 to 4 times a year. Now, the question is, will the new immune system be as good as the one it's replacing? Will it be worse than the one it's replacing? Or will it be better than the one it's replacing? And the option is related to how a person treats their immune system as to what the outcome will be. If they do the same things, they'll probably end up with the same immune system. If they do something they're under higher stress, they're exposed to more toxins, they're eating a poor diet, then their immune system is probably going to be less effective. If they do the opposite, and that is really tune up their diet, their lifestyle, their behavior, sleep patterns, we've shown now, just finished a clinical trial actually, showing you can actually improve immune system function over 4 months and be more resilient. So we're not talking just about boosting the immune system. We're talking about rejuvenating the immune system to be a younger you, so to speak. So that would be number 2.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally, a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
Number 3 is the endocrine system, which are the hormonal messaging system. We call it messenger molecules. So, and by the way, each of these systems is interrelated to the other. They don't stand alone. And the way I learned anatomy and physiology when I was in medical school was you study a specific organ system, we shut the book and take a test, then you move on to the next organ system and leave that other one behind. But they all interrelate one to the other. That's part of the functional medicine model of this systems approach. So the third would be the endocrine system, which are your sex hormones like estrogen, androgens like testosterone, progesterone. It can also include your stress hormones that are signaling molecules that like epinephrine and norepinephrine or adrenaline, noradrenaline. It can include things like cortisol produced by your adrenal glands, which is a stress hormone that influences your blood sugar level. All of those are part of the next, what we call fundamental physiological process. The next one after that is your what we call cell signaling process that are related to molecules that your body transports things around. So these would be things like your apolipoproteins that transport fats and vitamins to your body. If you think you eat food, your food is digested in your gut. It goes into your bloodstream, but then the question is, okay, how does it get to different cells to nourish them? And that relates to this transport system. So if you have a dysfunctional transport system, you have a high ApoB, for instance, or you have a high LDL, then you have a cardiovascular risk. Or so you start looking at how you modulate your transport. You get the right things to the right place at the right time. The next is the neurological system. And the neurological system has emerged to be very intimately connected to the to the immune and to the endocrine systems. So it's neuroendocrine immunology.
Yes.
They're all tied together. So when we think of the brain, we think of the neurons as doing the hardwiring busy work of the brain and thought and cognition. But actually within the brain, there are other cell types. One are called the glial cells, the microglia. Glia comes from the Greek glue-like, and so it was thought in neuroanatomy for a long time that these were cells that were providing glue-like substance that glued together the brain, the neurons. But more recently now, it's been found that no, these do more than just produce this glue. They're actually the brain's immune system, and they communicate with the immune system in the blood, which communicates with the immune system in the liver, called the Kupffer cells, which communicates with the immune system in the gut, which is called the gastrointestinal-associated lymphoid tissue. That forms a super system that regulates how your body is perceiving the outside world and communicating to the brain. So you could have people with gluten problems in their gut that then has a neurological effect on their brain chemistry and actually is associated with dementia over years of eating gluten-containing foods. Or you should have depression associated with alteration of gut immune system function that relates to what you eat and your microbiome. All these are interrelated. So the brain, the nervous system is more than just a nervous relay system. It's a communication system, and it connects to the immune system. Next is structural, and there we get into the connective tissue and to the bones. We used to think, the skeleton being that thing that's stuck over the side of our anatomy lab that was this dead collection of calcium hydroxyapatite. We had to learn all the names of all the bones. And I think we got thinking early on that the skeleton was kind of like, I don't want to call it a dead tissue, but it was kind of like a rock. But now we know that's a very simplistic understanding of the skeleton. The skeleton has got this thing called the red portion of the inner portion of our bones, which is the bone marrow. The marrow is the part of our body that produces all the white and red blood cells. So the bone marrow, our skeleton, is an active metabolic contributor to our overall health in the way that it regulates our immunological system and our immune systems. So when we think of skeletal health, we think more than just mechanical health. We think of metabolic health as well, and how the bones connect to the gut and the microbiome, how the bones connect to the connective tissue, the ligaments and tendons, which are these collagen-rich proteins that are living and also have inflammatory mediation potential that can produce, as we know, arthritis-like pain. So the skeleton is more than just structural. It has functional metabolic characteristics as well. And that ties to The last is the epithelial cell lining. The largest organ of the body are these cells that sit on the surface of our tissues, not just the skin. The skin is very important, obviously, but the mucosa that lines our intestinal tract, the internal lining of our blood vessels, the endothelium, all of those cell types are intercommunication, and they are regulators also of our function. So when we put all that together and we start assessing where symptoms appear in an individual, it allows us to kind of make hypotheses as to what part of this system is in dysfunction and where we to focus our attention.
That's a beautiful summary of systems biology. And one of the things that I've noticed is if we started to look at the human body as an ecosystem, and I've noticed certain traits in ecosystems, whether it be the ecosystem of the human body, the vast ecosystem of the oceans or the jungle, or organizations as an ecosystem, or maybe humanity as being one big ecosystem and an organism. We can see there's three fundamental traits. One, there's independence. Just like every single cell in the body has its own function, people within an organization has their own roles. Then there's a profound interdependence, just like you mentioned, that these cells have to be able to interact and communicate with each other. And then finally, there is a state dependence. Just like chronic stress could all of a sudden give every single cell in our body that there is a message of danger in the outside world, and every cell has to now turn on genes to react to that danger. In our organizations, in humanity, the same type of state controls everything in it as well. And when we talk about in my book, Thrive State, we really wanted to let people know that you can, by how you live your life, control each and every one of those factors. And as I was doing functional medicine as well, I started to note I would pick out certain different tests to see what was wrong. But if I pulled back and just became a big generalist, if I started working on sleep, nutrition, movement, their thoughts and mindset, their emotions, their social connections and purpose, all of a sudden, these system type things that I thought were off suddenly corrected. It was a beautiful thing to see. And is that something that you're starting to see in functional medicine? And could you then also give some messages of hope for people that might, have a chronic symptom or disease going on right now?
Well, I am really inspired by what you just said. I think that was just an eloquent summary manifestation of the reason, I guess to use the French raison d'etre, the reason for functional medicine. It is exactly what you were saying. And hope is the word. I think people talk about cellular plasticity. And what does cellular plasticity mean? It means that there is the hope that your cells that make up your tissues, that make up your organs, that make up your organ systems, that make up you as part of the system in which you live, all can be better tomorrow than it was today, no matter your chronological age. That is hope. That's, to me, the definition of biologically of hope. And that is a real deliverable. It is not just a false hope. It is a hope that has the ability to be executed upon. Now, it does require some commitment. It's not a hope that you just have by chance. You have to have some engagement and participation. I often say to people, if you really wanted to be good at something, wouldn't you think you have to practice it? And people say, well, yeah. No matter what, I might golf to tennis to computer programming to giving a speech, whatever. I got to practice to get good at it. Well, then I ask the question, do you think you have to practice to have good health? You need to practice good health. And many people say, well, I never really thought of it that way. I just thought good health was just given to me. It was a kind of a wild card. And I think what we're learning, particularly in a complex world that we live today with all the stresses and the variable toxins and everything, we have to work even a little harder to manifest hope into the outcome that we really are desiring. And I think what you said is beautiful. We've just finished a project that I believe exemplifies what you're saying. I got very interested in an immune active food that has been lost in America for 200 years called Himalayan Tartary buckwheat.
Yes.
It turns out it was a food brought over by our colonial ancestors because of its hardiness. It doesn't require fertilizer, it doesn't require pesticides, it doesn't require irrigation. It lives in bad soils, and it produces a remarkably nutritious seed, which has the highest level of immune strengthening polyphenols of any food that I'm aware of. And so we asked the question, why was it lost in America over the last couple hundred years? And who is growing it today? And to make a long story short, we found only one grower in the United States. This is about 4 years ago. There was a former Cornell University ag professor who had retired, and he and his wife had a little hobby farm in which, thanks to seeds they got from the USDA, was growing this ancient Himalayan Tartary buckwheat. So we formed a relationship with him. We ultimately purchased his farm and got totally engaged in this process. But it turns out that as we've learned about the extraordinary nutritional qualities of Himalayan Tartary buckwheat, we recognize that it is intimately engaged in a relationship with the soil in how it produces those nutrients. And when the soil is really healthy and the soil has a high immune vigilance, then the plant has a high immune vigilance. And then the people who eat the plant have a high immune vigilance. And then you ask, well, how do you get the soil to have high immune vigilance? You remember the soil is a living organism. So you go to the microbiome of the soil, which we study, and you do an analysis of the microbiome of the study, just like you do a microbiome analysis of the human gut bacteria. And you find out that 6 soils that have been overly treated with NPK fertilizers and pesticides and other ag chemicals, they are not healthy. And their microbiome is really disturbed. They have dysbiosis. And so if you want to really, now fortunately, the farmers that we have our relationship with are all organic farmers that have been growing 20 years or more organically. But what we found is that when we inoculated the soil with the friendly mycorrhiza, the fungi and bacteria that live cooperatively to improve the immune defense of the soil, that we can increase then the level of the immune strengthening nutrients in Himalayan Tartary buckwheat. This was a whole process that we've now pioneered and discovered, which then increases the nutritional value when we make this product available in the human food. So here's a classic example of you treat the planet right and you treat the bee, or you treat the human right by being respectful of the planet, and the planet then gives you return on your investment.
Wow, that's just a great analogy. How every single cell, every single animal, every single human, every single microbe, and the entire planet is connected. And we, by how we live our lives, affect this energy that is in the planet as well. You talked about the buckwheat, and I've gone to Big Bowl Health trying to buy it several times, but it's always sold out. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Big Bold Health and the Big Bold vision that you have. Now that you've had this understanding of functional medicine, what is the vision of Big Bold Health, and what are some of the products out there right now that, the ones that aren't sold out? What can it do for human health?
Well, thank you. So I obviously feel extraordinarily fortunate that I've met the people I've met, had the experiences that I've had. I feel that the fortune that I've had over my years in this field deserves some kind of pay for it. And I'm at the place in my life now where it's time to pay for it and to see what I can do to transfer whatever I've learned to value of people that are going to take it to the next level. And so I had a long discussion with my wife about this and said, it seems like I should do one more thing here before I throw it in. And so my associate that's worked with me for over 25 years, she said, well, Jeff, you're fairly big in stature, I'm about 6'4", and you have a big presence, and your ideas are always kind of bold. Maybe you need to start a company called Big Bold Health that just allows you a forum to talk about these issues and to get people engaged. So that then 3 years ago, we started Big Bold Health, and we fell on this Himalayan Tartary buckwheat as a consequence of our hobby, which is traveling up to Alaska in our boat. We've done over 35,000 miles of exploring in Alaska over the years. And I met this remarkable guy who owned a fishing company out of Seattle, commercial fishing company, that he was very worried about sustainability of our fishery. And I didn't understand the difference between Alaska. It's the only place in the world that has a completely sustainable fishery. They don't allow food fish farming or any kind of other alteration. They have quotas and sustainability limits. So he and I basically, through a whole series of things, eventually formed a cooperative with Native Alaskan group to form a company in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, which is out in the Aleutian Islands, that recycles fish waste that was previously being thrown back into the ocean into ingredients that are able to be reused in nutrition products. So we have a series of fish oil products that I think are unique among any of the fish oil products that come from reclaimed fish waste from the Alaskan fishery, which we produce in our plant in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. So it's those two kind of activities that then said, well, maybe we can take this view of renourishing and rejuvenating the immune system and tie it to specific products that people can take to really make a difference. And then we tie that into a program, which we call Immunity Plus program, where over 90 days we can really rejuvenate a person's immune system. So that became the Big Bull Health Company about 3 years ago. And I'm really excited actually to see what's happened over those years. We now have hundreds of thousands of customers, and we became actually surprising. Our Himalayan Tartary buckwheat flour became the #1 selling artisanal flour on Amazon, which if no one even had heard 3 years ago of Himalayan Tartary buckwheat, now it's getting much more understanding. We have chefs and a food lab that develop recipes and menu guides, and we'll make sure, by the way, that you get your Himalayan Tartary buckwheat flour. I'm very disappointed that we're not able to deliver it to you, but we'll get you some for sure. And I think that what I'm learning is that when you take a concept and you can find a way to deliver it to people so they can do something with it, and that they can see within a short period of time benefit in their health, now you have a feed-forward cycle that really encourages people to be involved with renourishing the planet and to be conscious about sustainability and regenerative agriculture and sustainability of the sea. All that fits together into a consistent program. So that's Big Bull Health.
Oh, amazing. Dr. Bland, just really wanted to thank you for your time. If people wanted to find out a little bit more about your current work, what you do, as well as Big Bull Health, where should they go?
One of two places. They can either go to bigbullhealth.com or they can go to jeffreybland.com. That's JEFFREYBLAND.com. There's resources and downloadable information. I have, I think, over 300 podcast videos available on all sorts of topics on my website. So there's lots of things that people can peruse.
Fascinating stuff. Please check it out. Now, I know you've got a special bonus for the people that do the VIP. And just a reminder, if you get the VIP pass, you'll not only get all the recordings, all the audios, all the transcripts, but you get bonuses from each one of our speakers. And all that goes back to 4 nonprofits that we are actually supporting in this summit: the Trevor Project, Rare Impact, Good Days, and then finally our mutual friend Joe Polish's Genius Recoveries is also a benefactor of the summit. So, Dr. Bland, what is the bonus that the people will be getting when they sign up for the VIP?
Yeah, thank you. We put together an ebook that I hope will be very helpful for people, that talks a little bit about the connection between mood and cognition and our sense of behavior, brain chemistry, basically, to our immune system, and how we can optimize that function.
Beautiful. Dr. Bland, I wanted to thank you for the decades of work of following through to a vision you have for not only better health, but better humanity. And I would just wanted to share my deep felt gratitude for the amount of wisdom, your vibrant energy still when you talk about functional medicine with our audience today on the Thrive State Summit.
Well, I want to turn it right back to you and say I want to thank you for your dedication to what you're doing. This is all a state of infection of ideas that will make people's lives better. And we want these to be infections that grow multiplicatively from person to person by word of mouth. And you're doing a tremendous job in providing the resource to get people started. So thank you.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you have subscribed to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.